The implications hit Jessica like a physical blow. "You're saying these alien plants are getting ready to spread?" "We're saying we don't know what they're preparing for," Dr. Chen replied gravely. "Which is why we need someone with your expertise to help us find out." Dr. Eastman always believed that when the time came, a veterinary pathologist would be best equipped to understand the biological mechanisms involved. And that's when Jessica understood why helicopters had been part of the original hook that brought them here. Whatever was happening with these extraterrestrial specimens was approaching a critical phase that would require immediate, high-level response. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The barn hadn't just been a desperate purchase to avoid homelessness. It had been their recruitment into humanity's first line of defense against an alien biological threat. Before Dr. Chen could explain more about Jessica's potential role in Project Sanctuary, alarms began blaring throughout the underground facility. Red lights flashed as automated systems activated, and the displays around them shifted to show external security feeds. "We have multiple vehicles approaching," Dr. Chen announced, her calm demeanor instantly replaced by urgent professionalism. "This is what we were afraid would happen." On the monitors, Jessica could see a convoy of black SUVs and unmarked vans racing down their access road, kicking up clouds of dust in the fading daylight. The vehicles moved with military precision, suggesting this wasn't a casual investigation. "Who are they?" Jessica asked, pulling Marcus closer to her. "Corporate acquisitions specialists," Dr. Chen replied grimly, rapidly typing commands into the facility's control systems. "Blackwater subsidiary called Meridian Solutions. They've been trying to gain access to Project Sanctuary sites for the past 3 years. The lead vehicle stopped directly in front of the barn, and Jessica watched as armed personnel in tactical gear began deploying around the building. "Mom, are those soldiers?" Marcus whispered, staring at the screens. "Private. Military contractors," Dr. Chen corrected. "Much more dangerous than soldiers because they don't follow military rules of engagement." A man in an expensive suit emerged from the lead SUV, flanked by 2 security operatives. Even through the security cameras, his authoritative bearing was unmistakable. Dr. Chen cursed under her breath when she saw him. Martin Voss, Meridian's Director of Strategic Acquisitions. He's been hunting Project Sanctuary facilities for years, trying to gain control of our research for commercial exploitation. The external communication system crackled to life with an amplified voice. "Dr. Rivera, this is Martin Voss representing Meridian Solutions. We're here to offer you a substantial purchase agreement for your property and all associated research. Materials." Jessica felt a chill at hearing her name. These people had been monitoring their activities closely enough to know exactly who had bought the property. "Our offer is $15 million cash, with immediate transfer and a generous relocation package for you and your son. This is a limited-time offer that expires in exactly 10 minutes. Dr. Chen was frantically working at the control station. "They can't legally take the facility by force, but they can make life extremely difficult if you refuse their offer. Meridian has lawyers, political connections, and enough resources to tie you up in court for decades." Marcus looked between his mother and Dr. Chen. "What happens if we say no?" "They'll find other ways to pressure you," Dr. Chen replied. "Suddenly, you'll face building code violations, environmental inspections, tax problems, maybe even child welfare investigations, questioning whether this facility is a suitable environment for a minor." Voss's voice came through the speakers again, but this time with information that made Jessica's blood run cold. "Dr. Rivera, we know about your employment history at Mountain View Animal Hospital, your financial difficulties following the corporate buyout, and your son, Marcus's academic achievements at Roosevelt Middle School. We also know about your veterinary specialization in zoonotic diseases, qualifications that make you uniquely valuable to our research initiatives. The fact that they knew Marcus's school and her specific professional background meant they'd been conducting surveillance far beyond simple property monitoring. We're prepared to offer Marcus a full scholarship to any university of his choice, plus guaranteed admission to our advanced scientific education programs. This is an opportunity to secure your son's future while contributing to groundbreaking research that could benefit all humanity. Dr. Chen shook her head. Don't trust anything he says about benefiting humanity. Meridian's only interest is weaponizing extraterrestrial biological materials for military applications. The location was only 90 minutes from the city, close enough for Marcus to potentially stay in his current school district if she could arrange transportation. Rural enough that living costs would be dramatically lower than their current. Apartment rent. She found herself researching barn conversions on her phone, discovering dozens of examples where people had transformed agricultural buildings into homes, art studios, event spaces. The possibilities weren't just theoretical, they were proven, documented, achievable. Marcus found her still researching when he arrived at the laundromat after school, his backpack heavy with textbooks and his expression carefully neutral, in the way that told Jessica he was worried, but trying not to show it. Working on homework? He asked, settling into the plastic chair beside her. Looking at something interesting, Jessica said, turning her phone screen toward him. What do you think about barns? Marcus studied the photo with the same careful consideration he applied to everything. At 12, he'd already developed a maturity beyond his years, shaped by watching his mother navigate their financial struggles with determination and grace. Like, to live in? He asked. Maybe. It would. Be a project. A big one. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then asked the question Jessica had been avoiding. Is this because we have to move? Jessica had never lied to her son about their situation. She'd explained the eviction notice that morning in terms he could understand, watching his face as he processed what it meant for their lives. It's one option, she said honestly. A risky one, but maybe better than giving up everything we've built here. Marcus nodded slowly, his finger tracing the outline of the barn on her phone screen. It looks like the barn in that movie we watched. The one where the family fixes up the old place and makes it beautiful. The reference made Jessica smile despite everything. Marcus had always been her optimist, finding possibilities where adults saw only problems. If he could see potential in this crazy idea, maybe it wasn't completely insane. We'd have to use almost all the money we have left, she warned, and there's no guarantee it would work. But if it did work, Marcus said with the straightforward logic that had gotten them through harder times than this, we wouldn't have to leave. We'd just be pioneers or something. Pioneers. Jessica liked the sound of that better than refugees. That night, after Marcus had gone to bed in their cramped studio apartment, Jessica dove deeper into researching Lot 47. She pulled up county records, satellite images, and every piece of information she could find about the property. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The barn had been built in 1962 by a man named Dr. Harold Eastman, according to property records. But unlike typical agricultural barns, this one seemed unusually large and sophisticated for the relatively small acreage. The satellite view showed it was positioned oddly on the property, not near where a farmhouse would typically sit, but rather isolated in the center of the 12 acres, surrounded by dense tree cover that had grown up over the decades. What really caught her attention were the building permits filed in the county archives. The original construction permit listed it as an agricultural research facility rather than a simple barn. Subsequent permits in the 1960s and 70s showed modifications for climate control systems, specialized ventilation, and something called environmental containment upgrades. These weren't typical improvements for storing hay and housing livestock. Dr. Harold Eastman's background made the picture even more intriguing. Jessica found his obituary from 1987 in the local newspaper archives. He'd been a veterinarian, but not the kind she was familiar with. His specialty was listed as exotic animal pathology and infectious disease research. He'd worked for various government agencies before retiring to private practice in the early 1960s. The more she read, the more Jessica's professional curiosity was piqued. This wasn't just a barn. It was some kind of specialized facility designed by someone with her exact background knowledge. Even more compelling was what she discovered about Dr. Eastman's work. Several academic papers from the 1950s bore his name, focusing on zoonotic diseases, illnesses that could jump from animals to humans. During the height of Cold War tensions, this kind of research would have been considered critical to national security. The property had remained in Dr. Eastman's family until 2019, when his last surviving relative, a nephew in Florida, had inherited it and immediately stopped paying taxes. The nephew, according to a brief phone conversation Jessica had with the county tax office, had never even visited the property and seemed eager to be rid of it. "Weird place," the tax clerk had told her off the record. The nephew said his uncle was some kind of hermit scientist, kept talking about how the family always wondered what the old man was doing out there all those years, said he wouldn't be surprised if there were still chemical containers or research equipment just sitting in that barn. This information should have been a red flag. Instead, Jessica found herself more intrigued than concerned. Her veterinary training had included extensive work with hazardous materials, infectious disease protocols, and laboratory safety procedures. If Dr. Eastman had left behind research materials, she might be one of the few people qualified to properly assess and handle them. More importantly, if there were valuable scientific equipment or materials in that barn, the $750 investment could pay for itself many times over. The next morning over breakfast, cereal with milk stretched thin with water, Jessica shared her discoveries with Marcus. She'd learned years ago that treating him as a partner in their decisions, rather than just a child to be protected, led to better outcomes for both of them. "So this Dr. Eastman was like a scientist who studied animal diseases?" Marcus asked, processing the information with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "Exactly. And based on what I'm reading, he might have left behind equipment that could be worth a lot of money. Microscopes, laboratory instruments, maybe even research data that universities or companies would want to buy." Marcus nodded slowly, then asked the question Jessica had been hoping he would. "And you'd know how to handle that stuff safely, right? Because of your veterinary training?" "Better than most people," Jessica confirmed. "I've worked with infectious samples, handled laboratory equipment, dealt with biosafety protocols. If there's anything dangerous there, I'd know how to identify it and either make it safe or call the right authorities." The beauty of Marcus's 12-year-old logic was that he could see possibilities without being paralyzed by adult anxieties about worst-case scenarios. "It sounds like this Dr. Eastman guy was kind of like you," Marcus observed, "working with animals and trying to keep people safe from diseases. Maybe he left the barn for someone like you to find." Jessica smiled at her son's optimistic interpretation, but privately wondered if he might be right. The coincidence of her specific skill set aligning perfectly with this opportunity felt almost too convenient to be random. By noon, Jessica had made her decision. She withdrew $800 from their savings account, leaving them with less than $200 for emergencies, and prepared for the afternoon auction. The drive to the county courthouse gave her time to think through the practical challenges. Even if she won the auction, They'd need supplies to make any part of the barn livable, basic camping equipment, water containers, a generator for electricity, and materials for basic weatherproofing. Her truck, a reliable 2015 Toyota Tacoma she'd bought specifically for its utility when working large animal calls, would handle the rural access road mentioned in the listing. Most importantly, she had a plan that went beyond just desperate survival. If the barn contained valuable research equipment or materials, she could inventory and sell them to fund proper conversion of the space into a home. Her veterinary contacts included several researchers at the state university who might be interested in vintage laboratory equipment for their programs. Even if the materials weren't valuable, the building itself was substantial enough to provide both living space and the possibility of starting her own veterinary practice, focusing on large animals and exotic pets. Marcus had packed a bag with 3 days' worth of clothes and his essential books, treating their potential move as an adventure rather than a catastrophe. His confidence in her decision made Jessica more certain she was making the right choice. As they pulled into the courthouse parking lot, Jessica felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine excitement about the future. Win or lose, they were taking action instead of just reacting to circumstances beyond their control. Whatever was waiting for them in that barn, they were about to find out together. The county courthouse auction room buzzed with the quiet energy of experienced investors and curious locals. Jessica and Marcus sat in the back row, watching as seasoned property flippers examined their catalogues and whispered calculations to each other. Most of the attendees wore the confident expressions of people who knew exactly what they were doing. Jessica felt distinctly out of place in her work clothes, clean jeans and a veterinary clinic polo shirt, surrounded by men in expensive boots and women with designer handbags who clearly made their living from these auctions. But she noticed something interesting. None of them seemed particularly interested in Lot 47. During the preview period, she overheard conversations that explained why. 12 acres in the middle of nowhere with just a barn. No house, no utilities, and you need a 4-wheel drive just to get there, one investor muttered to his partner. Plus, who knows what kind of environmental issues there might be if some scientist was doing experiments out there. Another flipper shook his head when his colleague pointed to the listing. Agricultural research facility from the 1960s? That's code for potential hazmat nightmare. Could cost more to clean up than the land is worth. Jessica realized that her veterinary background, which made her comfortable with biosafety concerns, was actually giving her a significant advantage. What scared away other bidders made her more confident in her ability to handle whatever they might find. Marcus squeezed her hand as the auctioneer began working through the property list. "You've got this, Mom," he whispered. "Nobody else even wants it." When lot number 47 appeared on the projection screen, Jessica felt her heart rate spike. The photo showed the massive red barn from an aerial view, emphasizing just how isolated it was. In the center of the wooded acreage, next we have Lot 47, the auctioneer announced in his rapid-fire cadence. 12 acres with agricultural research facility, Riverside County. Property sold as is, no utilities. Access road requires 4-wheel drive vehicle. Opening bid at $750. Do I hear $750? Jessica raised her numbered paddle, hand trembling slightly. The auctioneer nodded in her direction. $750 from bidder 93. Do I hear $800? The room remained silent. Jessica scanned the faces around her, expecting someone to jump in, but the seasoned investors weren't even paying attention. They'd already moved on to studying later lots they considered more promising, going once for $750. Still silence. Going twice for $750. Jessica held her breath, unable to believe that something this significant might actually be within her reach. Sold to bidder 93 for $750. The gavel came down with a sound that seemed to echo through Jessica's entire body. She had just committed nearly everything they had to a property she'd never seen in person, based on research conducted in the middle of the night and a 12-year-old's faith in her judgment. As Jessica completed the paperwork and handed over the cashier's check that represented almost their entire remaining funds, the clerk gave her a curious look. "The Eastman place, huh?" the woman said, processing the transaction. "You're the first person to bid on that property in the 3 auctions we've held. Most folks seem to think it's more trouble than it's worth." "What kind of trouble?" Jessica asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer now that the deal was done. "Oh, nothing specific," the clerk replied quickly. "Just rumors about what Dr. Eastman was doing out there all those years. You know how people talk about scientists who keep to themselves. Probably nothing to it." She handed Jessica a sealed envelope containing the property deed, keys, and a thick folder of documents. "GPS coordinates are in there since there's no proper address. And you'll definitely need that 4-wheel drive. The access road hasn't been maintained in years." As they walked back to the truck, Jessica felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration that reminded her of the moment she'd decided to leave her ex-husband. The same sense of stepping off a cliff without knowing if there was solid ground below. The GPS coordinates led them 45 minutes outside the city, through increasingly rural roads that shifted from asphalt to gravel to what could generously be called a dirt track. Jessica's Tacoma handled the rough terrain easily, but she understood why the county had specified 4-wheel drive as a requirement. "Look, Mom," Marcus pointed through the windshield as they crested a small hill. "There it is." The barn was even more impressive in person than in the satellite images. It stood 3 stories tall, built from steel and concrete rather than traditional wood, painted in the classic red that had faded to a weathered burgundy. But it was clearly constructed for durability rather than aesthetics. Heavy-duty ventilation systems lined the roof, and Jessica noticed what appeared to be backup power connections and specialized utility hookups that suggested this building had once consumed significant amounts of electricity. The 12 acres stretched out around the barn, mostly overgrown with native vegetation but showing signs of having once been carefully landscaped. A concrete pad extended from the building's main entrance, large enough for substantial vehicles or equipment delivery. Most intriguingly, there were no windows on the ground level, only small, reinforced openings near the roofline that suggested this facility had been designed for security as much as functionality. Jessica parked near the main entrance and retrieved the keys from the envelope. There were 3 of them. A standard door key, a heavy-duty deadbolt key, and a 3rd key unlike anything she'd seen before. Thick and complex, with what appeared to be magnetic strips embedded in the metal. The main door was steel, painted, the same faded red as the building exterior, with multiple locking mechanisms that spoke to serious security concerns. Jessica tried the standard key first, hearing the satisfying click of a well-maintained lock mechanism. "Stay close to me," she told Marcus as they stepped inside. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." The interior took her breath away. Instead of the empty agricultural space she'd expected, they found themselves in what was clearly a decontamination chamber. Shower heads were mounted in the ceiling, floor drains suggested the entire space could be flooded for cleaning, and there were still chemical storage cabinets mounted on the walls. Everything was dusty, but in remarkably good condition, as if Dr. Eastman had simply locked up one day and never returned. Beyond the decontamination area, a heavy door marked with biohazard symbols led deeper into the facility. This was where the 3rd, unusual key fit perfectly. Marcus moved closer to Jessica as the door opened with a pneumatic hiss that suggested sophisticated sealing mechanisms were still functional after decades of abandonment. "Mom," he whispered, "this doesn't look like any barn I've ever seen." Jessica nodded, her veterinary training helping her recognize equipment and protocols that went far beyond typical agricultural research. Whatever Dr. Eastman had been working on here, it was significant enough to require laboratory-grade biosafety measures, and they were about to find out exactly what had been worth protecting so carefully. Beyond the decontamination chamber, Jessica and Marcus found themselves in a facility that defied every assumption they'd made about their purchase. The main floor of the barn stretched out before them like something from a science fiction movie, a vast laboratory space with workstations, specialized equipment, and infrastructure that would have cost millions to install. But it was all decades old, covered in dust, and clearly abandoned. Jessica walked slowly through the space, her veterinary training helping her identify equipment she recognized, alongside instruments she'd never seen before. Centrifuges, microscopes, incubators, and what appeared to be electron microscopy stations filled the main floor. Industrial freezers lined one wall, their power long since disconnected. Chemical storage cabinets bore faded hazmat labels in multiple languages. The scale of what Dr. Eastman had built here was staggering, and the implications of what it would take to make any of this functional again were equally overwhelming. "Mom, look at this," Marcus called from across the room. He was standing near what appeared to be a control station with banks of monitors and communication equipment. "There are phones and radios and stuff here, like really old-school government-type equipment." Jessica joined him, examining the communication setup. Some of the equipment bore U.S. government property tags with numbers that suggested this facility had been officially connected to federal agencies. The communications array was sophisticated enough to reach anywhere in the world, with encryption capabilities that seemed excessive for agricultural research. The reality hit her like a physical blow. They hadn't bought a barn with some leftover research equipment. They'd bought what appeared to be a classified government research facility that had been mothballed and forgotten. As they explored further, the practical challenges mounted. The facility had its own power substation, but the electrical systems would need complete inspection and likely full replacement before they could safely live here. The water supply came from a well, but it fed through a complex filtration and treatment system that hadn't been maintained in decades. The heating and cooling systems were industrial grade, designed to maintain precise climate control throughout. The facility, even basic utilities, would cost thousands of dollars to restore, assuming the systems could be brought back online at all. Most concerning were the biohazard containment systems built into every aspect of the facility. Negative pressure ventilation, sealed storage areas, and emergency protocols suggested that Dr. Eastman's work had involved materials dangerous enough to require military-grade safety measures. Jessica's veterinary background made her more comfortable with biosafety than most people, but the scope of precautions here went far beyond anything she'd encountered in civilian practice. "Marcus, don't touch anything else," she said, her professional caution overriding her curiosity. "We need to understand what we're dealing with before we start exploring freely." They climbed to the second floor, using a metal staircase that rang with each step. The upper level contained what appeared to be living quarters, a small apartment with basic amenities, clearly designed for researchers who needed to stay on site for extended periods. The furniture was simple but functional, and large windows provided the first natural light they'd encountered in the building. From the second-floor windows, Jessica could see the full scope of their 12 acres. The property was larger than it had appeared from ground level, with cleared areas that might once have been landing pads or equipment staging areas. While Jessica was cataloging problems and costs, Marcus was approaching their discovery with characteristic 12-year-old wonder. "Mom, this is like something from a spy movie," he said, looking out at the expansive facility below them. Dr. Eastman must have been working on something really important to need all this equipment. Important. Yes, Jessica agreed carefully, but also potentially dangerous. All these safety systems exist for a reason. Marcus considered this with his usual thoughtfulness, then offered the perspective that Jessica needed to hear. But if it was really dangerous, they wouldn't have just left it here, right? They would have cleaned it up or destroyed it or something. His logic was sound, and it helped Jessica step back from her growing panic to think more analytically about their situation. Dr. Eastman had operated this facility for decades without incident. The government had allowed the property to be sold at public auction rather than seizing it as a contaminated site. The sophisticated safety systems suggested awareness and preparation for potential dangers, not reckless disregard for consequences. "You might be right," she admitted. "And you know what else? If this equipment is still functional, even the basic laboratory instruments could be worth more than we paid for the entire property." Marcus grinned. "So we didn't just buy a place to live. We bought like a treasure hunt." That perspective shift changed everything. Instead of seeing overwhelming problems, Jessica began to recognize potential assets. The electron microscopy. Equipment alone, if functional, could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to universities or research institutions. Even obsolete laboratory instruments had value to collectors and smaller research facilities. More importantly, the facility's infrastructure represented an enormous head start on any kind of scientific or educational venture. The decontamination. Systems, specialized ventilation, and climate control capabilities would make this facility attractive to legitimate researchers who needed biosafety capabilities. Jessica could envision converting part of the space into a specialized veterinary clinic for exotic animals or infectious disease cases that required isolation protocols. The communication equipment, while outdated, included capabilities that might be valuable to emergency services or educational institutions. The living quarters on the second floor could house researchers or serve as temporary accommodation while they figured out their long-term plans. Most significantly, the property's isolation, which had seemed like a drawback, was actually a major asset for any kind of research that required security and privacy. "Marcus, I think you're right about this being like a treasure hunt," Jessica said, looking around the apartment area with new eyes. "But we need to be smart about it. We'll start by making the living quarters functional, then systematically catalog everything in the laboratory areas." Marcus nodded eagerly. "And if we find anything really valuable, we can sell it to help pay for fixing up the rest." "Exactly. Dr. Eastman spent decades building this place. There's got to be enough value here to support our investment, even if we only use part of the facility." As they prepared to head back down to their truck to retrieve their camping supplies, Jessica felt her panic giving way to cautious optimism. They had challenges ahead, certainly, but they also had possibilities she'd never imagined when she bid on a simple foreclosed barn. What they didn't know was that their movements through the facility had already triggered automated systems that were beginning to send signals to monitoring stations that still existed decades after Dr. Eastman's death. The next morning, after spending their first night in the second-floor apartment using sleeping bags and camping equipment, Jessica decided to approach their situation methodically. Her veterinary training had taught her to observe carefully before making assumptions, and this facility deserved the same careful analysis she'd apply to diagnosing a complex case. She started by creating a detailed inventory, beginning with the main laboratory floor. Marcus proved to be an excellent assistant, his curiosity leading him to notice details that might have escaped adult attention. "Mom, why do some of these machines have numbers that start with USG and others just have regular serial numbers?" he asked, examining equipment labels with the thoroughness of someone who'd grown up reading everything within reach. Jessica paused in her documentation to look at what Marcus had found. He was right. Roughly half the equipment bore standard manufacturer identification, while the other half carried government property tags with classification codes she didn't recognize. The pattern suggested that Dr. Eastman had been conducting both private research and government-contracted work, possibly simultaneously. "That's a really good observation," she told Marcus. "It means some of this equipment might still technically belong to the government, which could complicate things if we try to sell it." But as they continued their inventory, Jessica noticed something else. The government-tagged equipment was generally older and appeared to have been used less frequently than the privately owned instruments. Whatever Dr. Eastman's official work had been, his personal research seemed to have taken precedence in later years. It was Marcus who made the discovery that changed everything. While Jessica was photographing a particularly sophisticated centrifuge system, Marcus had wandered to what appeared to be a supply storage area. The wall-mounted cabinets were locked, but he'd noticed something unusual about one section of shelving. "Mom, come look at this," he called. "This shelf sounds different when you knock on it." Jessica joined him at the storage wall, where Marcus demonstrated by tapping on different sections. Most produced the solid sound of metal backing, but one cabinet resonated with a hollow echo. "You're right," she agreed, running her hands along the cabinet frame. "Let me see if any of our keys work on these locks." The standard keys didn't fit, but when Jessica tried the complex third key, the one with magnetic strips that had opened the main laboratory door, the lock mechanism clicked open with a soft electronic beep. Inside was not the medical supplies or laboratory materials she'd expected, but rather a small elevator. "Whoa," Marcus breathed, staring at the compact lift system. Dr. Eastman had a secret elevator in his barn? The elevator was clearly designed for discreet transport of materials rather than people, but it was large enough for both of them to fit. A simple control panel showed 3 levels: ground, sub-1, and sub-2. Jessica realized that their barn was only the visible portion of Dr. Eastman's facility. There were at least 2 more levels underground that hadn't appeared on any of the property records or building permits she'd researched. Despite every instinct telling her to proceed cautiously, Jessica's scientific curiosity won out. If Dr. Eastman had hidden additional laboratory space underground, it might contain the most valuable equipment and research materials. "Stay right next to me," she instructed Marcus as they stepped into the elevator. "And if anything seems dangerous, we leave immediately." She pressed the button for sub-1, and the elevator descended smoothly and quietly. When the doors opened, they found themselves in a corridor lined with what appeared to be specialized research chambers, each with its own climate control and monitoring systems. Unlike the main laboratory upstairs, these underground facilities showed signs of recent activity. The dust wasn't as thick, and some of the monitoring equipment still displayed active readings. "Mom, look at this." Marcus pointed to a wall-mounted display that showed various environmental readings for different chambers. "Some of these rooms are still running, the temperature controls and everything." Jessica studied the display, recognizing biosafety monitoring systems that were more sophisticated than anything she'd encountered in civilian veterinary practice. These were containment facilities designed for research that required absolute environmental control. Following the lit indicators on the monitoring display, Jessica and Marcus found themselves at a chamber marked Project Sanctuary, with an airlock-style entrance. Through a small viewing window, they could see that this room was still fully operational, with growth chambers, monitoring equipment, and what appeared to be some kind of biological specimens. But these weren't the disease samples or pathological specimens Jessica had expected, based on Dr. Eastman's published research. The growth chambers contained what looked like plant specimens, but unlike any plants she'd ever seen. The vegetation had an almost metallic sheen and seemed to be growing in a substrate that looked more like crushed minerals than soil. A logbook sat on a table near the viewing window, left open to an entry dated just 6 months ago. Long after Dr. Eastman's death in 1987, Jessica read the final entry aloud. Day 11-247 since initial cultivation. Specimens continue to thrive in mineral substrate. Electromagnetic absorption rates remain stable at 94% efficiency. Dr. Eastman's theoretical framework proving correct after 36 years. Recommend immediate contact with oversight authority if facility status changes. The entry was signed with initials that didn't match Dr. Eastman's name, suggesting that someone else had been maintaining this research for decades after the official owner's death. Marcus pressed his face to the viewing window, staring at the unusual plants. "Mom, what do you think those things are?" Jessica didn't have an answer, but her veterinary training told her they were looking at something far beyond typical botanical research. The metallic appearance of the plants, combined with references to electromagnetic absorption, suggested Dr. Eastman had been working on something with potential military or energy applications, and someone had been continuing his work in secret for over 30 years. After their unsettling discovery in the underground facility, Jessica decided they needed supplies and, more importantly, information about their property from people who had lived in the area during Dr. Eastman's time. She and Marcus drove to the nearest town, Pine Ridge, a small community about 20 minutes from their barn. Pine Ridge was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, which Jessica hoped would work in their favor. Their first stop was Kowalski's Hardware, a family-owned store that looked like it had been serving the community since the 1950s. The owner, a sturdy woman in her 60s named Carol Kowalski, looked up from her inventory clipboard when they entered. "You folks new to the area don't recognize you. We just bought the old Eastman property," Jessica explained. "I'm Jessica Rivera, and this is my son Marcus. We're trying to get the place habitable and could use some advice about local contractors." Carol's expression shifted immediately from friendly curiosity to something more guarded. "The Eastman place?" she repeated, setting down her clipboard. "Well, I'll be. We wondered what would happen to that property after Harold passed. His nephew never showed any interest in it." She studied Jessica with new attention. "You know what you've gotten yourself into out there?" "We're learning," Jessica replied carefully. "It's quite a facility, much more sophisticated than we expected." Carol nodded slowly. "Harold was a brilliant man, but eccentric. Kept to himself mostly, came into town maybe once a month for supplies. Always paid cash, always polite, but there was something about him that made you not want to ask too many questions." Despite her obvious reservations about the Eastman property, Carol proved remarkably helpful. When Jessica mentioned needing basic electrical work and plumbing supplies, Carol immediately offered practical assistance. "My son Mike does electrical work, licensed and bonded. He's helped maintain some of the equipment out at the Henderson Ranch, so he's comfortable with agricultural installations." She pulled out a business card from behind the counter. "Tell him I sent you, and he'll give you fair pricing." But then Carol lowered her voice, glancing around the empty store. "Jessica, can I give you some advice? Be careful who you tell about what you find out there. Harold's work. It attracted attention from people you probably don't want to deal with." "What kind of attention?" Jessica asked. "Government types mostly. Black SUVs with federal plates, helicopters doing flyovers, that sort of thing. Started in the late 1970s and continued right up until Harold died. After that, the attention died down, but—" Carol hesitated. "Well, let's just say there are still people who remember what Harold was working on, and they might not be happy to hear someone new is poking around out there." The mention of helicopters sent a chill down Jessica's spine, though she couldn't yet understand why. Marcus, who had been quietly examining the hardware displays, rejoined the conversation. Did Dr. Eastman ever talk about what he was researching? Carol smiled at Marcus's directness. Smart boy. No, Harold never talked about his work, but we could make educated guesses. The deliveries he received were unusual. Scientific equipment, exotic materials, sometimes military escorts for particularly sensitive shipments. Their next stop was Pine Ridge Groceries, where they hoped to stock up on supplies and continue gathering local intelligence. The store owner, an elderly man named Frank Torres, proved even more forthcoming than Carol. The Eastman place, eh? Frank said when Jessica introduced herself. Harold was a good customer. Quiet, but always treated everyone with respect, paid his bills on time, never caused any trouble. He leaned across the counter conspiratorially. But I'll tell you something. Strange. About 2 months after Harold died, people started showing up asking questions about his property. Not locals, outsiders with expensive suits and government credentials. What kind of questions? Jessica asked. Whether Harold had left anything behind, whether anyone had been maintaining the property, whether any locals had been hired to do work out there. They seemed particularly interested in whether anyone had accessed the underground areas. Jessica and Marcus exchanged glances. The existence of underground facilities wasn't mentioned in any public records they'd found. Frank continued, Most recently, maybe 6 months ago, a woman came through asking about employment records for anyone who might have worked for Harold over the years. Said she was from some kind of environmental agency, doing a routine follow-up assessment. Did you tell her anything? Marcus asked. Frank chuckled. Son, I've been in this business 40 years. I can tell the difference between legitimate government, business and fishing expeditions. I told her Harold kept to himself and suggested she check with the county records office like everyone else. As they loaded groceries into their truck, Jessica's mind was processing the pattern of information they'd gathered. Multiple sources confirmed that Dr. Eastman's work had attracted ongoing government attention, that people were still interested in the property decades after his death, and that someone had recently been actively investigating who might have access to the facility. Most concerning was the suggestion that outsiders knew about underground areas that didn't appear on any official records. Mom, Marcus said as they drove back toward their property, do you think the person who's been maintaining those plants is the same person those government people are looking for? It was a perceptive question. If someone had been secretly continuing Dr. Eastman's research for 36 years, they would need to be extremely careful about avoiding detection. The sophisticated monitoring systems and active environmental controls they'd discovered suggested someone with both extensive knowledge of the facility and ongoing access to specialized resources. But it also raised the troubling possibility that their purchase of the property had disrupted a carefully maintained status quo. As they turned onto their access road, Jessica noticed tire tracks in the dirt that weren't from their truck. Fresh tracks, made since their arrival the day before. Someone had visited their property while they were in town. Marcus, did we lock the facility when we left this morning? Yeah, you made sure all the doors were secured, he confirmed. Why? Jessica pointed to the tire tracks. Because unless those are from Carol's son Mike coming to look at electrical work, we've had visitors. And given everything they'd learned in town about ongoing interest in the Eastman property, those visitors probably weren't there for friendly, neighborly reasons. When Jessica and Marcus approached the barn, the signs of unauthorized entry became unmistakable. The main door showed scratches around the lock mechanism, and muddy footprints led from the parking area to the building entrance. Most telling was a small electronic device attached to the door frame, a monitoring sensor that definitely hadn't been there when they left. Someone's been watching to see when we leave and return, Jessica realized, carefully photographing the device before removing it. The sensor was sophisticated, with wireless transmission capabilities and a battery pack designed for extended operation. Inside the facility, their careful inventory had been disrupted. Equipment had been moved slightly, and dust patterns showed that someone had conducted a thorough but professional search of the main laboratory level. But the most significant discovery was what the intruders had left behind: a tablet computer, sitting on the main workstation, displaying a message clearly intended for Jessica. The screen showed a simple text interface. "Dr. Rivera, we need to talk. Your discovery of active research protocols has triggered automated alerts. Meet us in sub-level 2 at 19 Naus hours. Come alone, but bring the boy. His safety depends on your cooperation. Project Sanctuary Oversight." Marcus read the message. Over her shoulder. "Mom, how do they know you're a doctor, and how do they know about the underground levels?" Every instinct told Jessica to take Marcus and leave immediately, but the message's mention of "his safety depends on your cooperation" made it clear that running wasn't an option. Whoever was behind this had resources and knowledge that would make hiding difficult. More importantly, the reference to Project Sanctuary Oversight suggested these weren't random intruders, but people connected to the official purpose of Dr. Eastman's facility. "We're going to that meeting," Jessica decided, "but on our terms. We'll go early, scout the area, and be prepared to leave quickly if things seem dangerous." She gathered supplies that might be useful: her veterinary emergency kit, a digital camera, her phone set to automatically upload photos to cloud storage, and the portable radiation detector she'd bought years ago for checking potentially contaminated animals. At 6:30 p.m., they descended to sub-level 2 for the first time. The lowest level of the facility was unlike anything they'd seen above. The elevator opened into what appeared to be a command center, with banks of monitors, communication equipment, and displays showing real-time data from locations around the world. The technology was clearly much more recent than Dr. Eastman's. 1960s installation. Maps on the walls showed facility locations across the United States, all marked with the same compass rose symbol they'd seen throughout the barn. This wasn't just a single research location. It was part of a network. At exactly 7 p.m., a woman emerged from a side chamber that Jessica hadn't noticed earlier. She was in her 50s, wearing practical field clothes and carrying herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "Dr. Rivera, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Continuity Operations for Project Sanctuary. Thank you for coming." "How do you know who I am?" Jessica asked directly. "Your veterinary license application 15 years ago flagged our monitoring systems," Dr. Chen replied matter-of-factly. "Your specialization in zoonotic diseases and infectious pathology matched our personnel profiles exactly. We've been tracking your career progression ever since, hoping someone with your qualifications would eventually find their way here." Marcus stepped closer to his mother. "You've been watching my mom for 15 years? Dr. Chen smiled at Marcus with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Not watching, Marcus, waiting. Your mother represents exactly the kind of scientific mind Dr. Eastman hoped would continue his work." She gestured toward the command center displays. "Project Sanctuary isn't just about research. It's about preparation. Dr. Eastman discovered something in 1963 that fundamentally changed our understanding of planetary defense." Dr. Chen led them to a secured viewing chamber overlooking the active research area they'd discovered earlier. But from this vantage point, Jessica could see the full scope of what Dr. Eastman had been working on. The metallic plants weren't just unusual specimens, they were a completely alien form of life. In 1963, Harold Eastman was investigating unusual livestock deaths in this area, Dr. Chen explained. What he found wasn't a disease, but evidence of extraterrestrial biological material that had been dormant in the soil for centuries, possibly millennia. The viewing chamber's displays showed detailed analysis of the plant specimens. Their cellular structure was unlike anything from Earth, incorporating metallic elements in ways that shouldn't have been biologically possible. Most significantly, they appeared to be designed for energy absorption and storage on a massive scale. The specimens you see are the result of 50 years of careful cultivation and study, Dr. Chen continued. They represent a form of biological technology that could revolutionize everything from energy production to space exploration. Marcus pressed his face to the viewing window. Are you saying those are alien plants? We're saying they're not from Earth, Dr. Chen confirmed. And they're not the only evidence. Dr. Eastman's facility is one of 12 across the country, all monitoring and studying different aspects of what we call planetary integration events. Jessica's scientific mind was reeling with the implications. Integration events? Evidence suggests that Earth has been visited multiple times throughout history, with various forms of extraterrestrial life taking root in our ecosystem. Most die out quickly, but occasionally something survives and adapts. Project Sanctuary exists to monitor these occurrences and assess their potential impact on human civilization. Dr. Chen pulled up additional displays showing global monitoring data. The specimens here have been stable for decades, but recently, their activity levels have increased dramatically. They're absorbing electromagnetic energy at unprecedented rates and showing signs of preparing for some kind of reproductive cycle. The implications hit Jessica like a physical blow. You're saying these alien plants are getting ready to spread? We're saying we don't know what they're preparing for, Dr. Chen replied gravely, which is why we need someone with your expertise to help us find out. Dr. Eastman always believed that when the time came, a veterinary pathologist would be best equipped to understand the biological mechanisms involved. And that's when Jessica understood why helicopters had been part of the original hook that brought them here. Whatever was happening with these extraterrestrial specimens was approaching a critical phase that would require immediate, high-level response. The barn hadn't just been a desperate purchase to avoid homelessness. It had been their recruitment into humanity's first line of defense against an alien biological threat. Before Dr. Chen could explain more about Jessica's potential role in Project Sanctuary, alarms began blaring throughout the underground facility. Red lights flashed as automated systems activated, and the displays around them shifted to show external security feeds. We have multiple vehicles approaching, Dr. Chen announced, her calm demeanor instantly replaced by urgent professionalism. This is what we were afraid would happen. On the monitors, Jessica could see a convoy of black SUVs and unmarked vans racing down their access road, kicking up clouds of dust in the fading daylight. The vehicles moved with military precision, suggesting this wasn't a casual investigation. Who are they? Jessica asked, pulling Marcus closer to her. Corporate acquisitions specialists, Dr. Chen replied grimly, rapidly typing commands into the facility's control systems. Blackwater subsidiary called Meridian Solutions. They've been trying to gain access to Project Sanctuary sites for the past 3 years. The lead vehicle stopped directly in front of the barn, and Jessica watched as armed personnel in tactical gear began deploying around the building. "Mom, are those soldiers?" Marcus whispered, staring at the screens. "Private. Military contractors," Dr. Chen corrected. "Much more dangerous than soldiers because they don't follow military rules of engagement." A man in an expensive suit emerged from the lead SUV, flanked by 2 security operatives. Even through the security cameras, his authoritative bearing was unmistakable. Dr. Chen cursed under her breath when she saw him. Martin Voss, Meridian's Director of Strategic Acquisitions. He's been hunting Project Sanctuary facilities for years, trying to gain control of our research for commercial exploitation. The external communication system crackled to life with an amplified voice. "Dr. Rivera, this is Martin Voss representing Meridian Solutions. We're here to offer you a substantial purchase agreement for your property and all associated research. Materials. Jessica felt a chill at hearing her name. These people had been monitoring their activities closely enough to know exactly who had bought the property. Our offer is $15 million cash, with immediate transfer and a generous relocation package for you and your son. This is a limited-time offer that expires in exactly 10 minutes. Dr. Chen was frantically working at the control station. They can't legally take the facility by force, but they can make life extremely difficult if you refuse their offer. Meridian has lawyers, political connections, and enough resources to tie you up in court for decades. Marcus looked between his mother and Dr. Chen. What happens if we say no? They'll find other ways to pressure you, Dr. Chen replied. Suddenly, you'll face building code violations, environmental inspections, tax problems, maybe even child welfare investigations, questioning whether this facility is a suitable environment for a minor. Voss's voice came through the speakers again, but this time with information that made Jessica's blood run cold. Dr. Rivera, we know about your employment history at Mountain View Animal Hospital, your financial difficulties following the corporate buyout, and your son, Marcus's academic achievements at Roosevelt Middle School. We also know about your veterinary specialization in zoonotic diseases, qualifications that make you uniquely valuable to our research initiatives. The fact that they knew Marcus's school and her specific professional background meant they'd been conducting surveillance far beyond simple property monitoring. We're prepared to offer Marcus a full scholarship to any university of his choice, plus guaranteed admission to our advanced scientific education programs. This is an opportunity to secure your son's future while contributing to groundbreaking research that could benefit all humanity. Dr. Chen shook her head. Don't trust anything he says about benefiting humanity. Meridian's only interest is weaponizing extraterrestrial biological materials for military applications. Jessica studied the security feeds, watching as more personnel continued to deploy around their property. The tactical positioning suggested they were prepared for a siege if necessary. How long can we stay down here? She asked Dr. Chen. The facility has independent life support for up to 2 weeks, but that's not the real problem. Meridian has legal resources that could eventually force access, and they have political connections that could reclassify this facility as a national security asset requiring immediate government intervention. Voss's voice returned, but this time with an edge of impatience. Dr. Rivera, our geological surveys indicate significant environmental hazards on your property that pose immediate risks to public safety. If you don't accept our acquisition offer within the next 5 minutes, we'll be forced to contact environmental protection agencies and child welfare services regarding the dangers of exposing a minor to potential biological contamination. The threat was expertly crafted. Even if Jessica could prove the facility was safe, the legal process of doing so would take months, during which Marcus could be removed from her custody as a precautionary measure. Marcus grabbed his mother's arm. "Mum, they can't really take me away, can they?" Jessica looked at Dr. Chen, who nodded grimly. "With the right paperwork and the right connections, they absolutely can. At least temporarily." "But we haven't done anything wrong," Marcus protested. "In situations like this," Dr. Chen explained gently, "being right doesn't matter as much as having better lawyers and more political influence." Jessica realized that Meridian had perfectly engineered a situation where her maternal instincts would override her scientific curiosity and moral principles. They were betting that she would choose her son's immediate safety over any larger concerns about protecting extraterrestrial research from corporate exploitation. Voss's voice came through the speakers one final time. "Dr. Rivera, you have 2 minutes to come upstairs and sign the transfer documents. After that, we'll be forced to pursue alternative acquisition strategies that may not be as beneficial for your family's future. Dr. Chen began rapidly downloading data from the facilities, computers onto portable storage devices. Jessica, whatever you decide, we need to preserve the research data. 50 years of scientific work can't be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. Jessica faced an impossible choice: accept Meridian's offer and protect Marcus from immediate harm, while potentially condemning humanity to the consequences of weaponized alien technology, or refuse and risk losing her son to a legal system that powerful corporations could manipulate at will, and she had less than 2 minutes to decide. "There's a third option," Dr. Chen announced, her fingers flying across the control panel. "Emergency. Protocol 7. Immediate extraction and federal protection for essential Project Sanctuary personnel." Jessica watched as Dr. Chen activated what appeared to be a military-grade communication system. "Control, this is Sanctuary 4, requesting immediate implementation of Protocol 7. We have corporate infiltration in progress with threats to civilian family unit." A crisp voice responded immediately. "Sanctuary 4, Protocol 7 authorized. Phoenix Wing is airborne. ETA 8 minutes. Maintain position and prepare for hot extraction." Marcus's eyes widened. "Phoenix Wing? That sounds like helicopters." "Military helicopters," Dr. Chen confirmed, pulling up real-time tracking data on her screens. "Project Sanctuary has federal protection protocols for exactly this situation. Meridian may have lawyers and money, but we have legitimate government authority." Jessica felt a surge of hope, but also apprehension. "What does federal protection mean for Marcus and me?" "It means you become official consultants to a classified government project," Dr. Chen explained, while continuing to secure research data, complete legal immunity, substantial compensation, and the resources to continue Dr. Eastman's work properly. As if responding to some unseen signal, Dr. Chen's communication board lit up with incoming messages from multiple sources. Jessica realized they were witnessing the activation of a carefully planned emergency network. "Sanctuary 7 reports Meridian vehicles approaching their facility in Nevada," Dr. Chen announced, reading updates. "Sanctuary 2 in Montana has implemented lockdown protocols. This isn't just about our site. Meridian is making a coordinated move against the entire project." The scope of the situation was becoming clear. This wasn't a simple corporate acquisition attempt, but a carefully orchestrated effort to seize control of the nation's extraterrestrial research capabilities. "Dr. Rivera," came a new voice through the communication system. "This is General Patricia Harrison, Project Sanctuary Command. I understand you're a veterinary pathologist with infectious disease experience?" "Yes, General," Jessica responded, surprised at being addressed directly by military command. "Dr. Eastman's files indicate you may be uniquely qualified to assist with a critical phase of our research. Are you willing to accept temporary federal appointment as a Project Sanctuary scientific advisor?" Marcus looked at his mother with excitement. "Mom, they're asking you to be a government scientist." Before Jessica could respond, the sound of helicopter rotors began echoing through the facility's ventilation system. Dr. Chen pulled up external cameras showing 2 military helicopters approaching their position, while Meridian's ground forces were retreating to a defensive perimeter. "General Harrison," Jessica said, "I need to understand what I'm agreeing to. What exactly is this critical phase Dr. Chen mentioned?" "The extraterrestrial specimens at your facility have begun exhibiting behavior patterns we've never seen before," the general replied. "They're responding to electromagnetic signals from space in ways that suggest communication or coordination with an external source." Dr. Chen's monitoring displays suddenly showed dramatic spikes in activity from the alien plants. Energy absorption rates were climbing rapidly, and the specimens appeared to be generating their own electromagnetic pulses. "Dr. Rivera," Dr. Chen said urgently. Your veterinary background in disease pathology may be exactly what we need. These organisms might be preparing for some kind of reproductive or spreading phase, but we need someone who understands biological life cycles to predict their behavior. Marcus was studying the energy readings with 12-year-old fascination. Mom, look at these numbers. Whatever those plants are doing, they're doing it faster and faster. The sound of helicopters landing outside was now clearly audible, along with amplified voices ordering Meridian personnel to stand down. Through the security feeds, Jessica could see federal agents deploying around the property with military precision. Dr. Rivera, General Harrison's voice came through the speakers with unmistakable authority. We need your decision now. Will you accept appointment as Project Sanctuary's scientific advisor? Jessica looked at Marcus, who nodded with the confidence she'd learned to trust. They'd come here seeking shelter from eviction and found themselves at the center of humanity's response to extraterrestrial contact. I accept, Jessica announced, but Marcus stays with me, and I want full disclosure about what we're dealing with. Agreed, the general replied immediately. Dr. Chen will brief you on current threat assessments while our teams secure the facility. Dr. Chen smiled for the first time since the alarms had started. Welcome to Project Sanctuary, Dr. Rivera. Now let's figure out what these alien specimens are really planning to do. As military personnel began entering the facility through the main entrance, Jessica realized their desperate purchase of a foreclosed barn had transformed into something far more significant than she'd ever imagined. They weren't just homeowners anymore. They were humanity's first line of defense against an alien biological event that was accelerating toward an unknown but potentially catastrophic conclusion. With federal agents securing the surface facility, Dr. Chen led Jessica and Marcus to the primary research chamber, where the alien specimens were reaching unprecedented activity levels. The plants now pulsed with visible energy, their metallic surfaces rippling with electromagnetic currents that made the air itself feel charged. What you're witnessing, Dr. Chen explained, pulling up global monitoring data, is happening simultaneously at all 12 Project Sanctuary sites across the United States. And we're detecting similar energy signatures at unmarked locations worldwide. The displays showed a terrifying pattern, energy spikes at coordinates spanning every continent, all synchronized to the minute with the activity in their facility. Dr. Rivera, General Harrison's voice came through the secure communication channel. We're reading energy outputs that exceed our theoretical models. These organisms aren't just communicating, they're coordinating a planetary-scale event. Marcus studied the global map with wide eyes. There are alien plants like this all over the world, not just plants, Dr. Chen corrected, activating additional monitoring systems. Dr. Eastman's research suggested multiple forms of extraterrestrial biology have been dormant in Earth's ecosystem for centuries. What we're seeing now appears to be a synchronized awakening. Jessica's veterinary training kicked in as she analyzed the biological data. The energy patterns weren't random, they followed the rhythmic cycle she recognized from reproductive biology. Dr. Chen, these readings look like preparation for a massive reproductive event. The electromagnetic pulses, the synchronized timing across global locations. It's identical to patterns I've seen in colonial organisms preparing for spore release. That's exactly what Dr. Eastman predicted, Dr. Chen confirmed, pulling up archived research files. His theoretical framework suggested that extraterrestrial organisms might remain dormant for decades or centuries, waiting for optimal conditions before attempting to establish permanent colonies. Jessica realized why her specific expertise was so crucial. Her specialization in zoonotic diseases, illnesses that jump between species, made her uniquely qualified to understand how alien biology might interact with Earth's ecosystem. Specimens aren't just reproducing, she announced, studying the energy patterns more carefully. They're preparing to integrate with Earth's biological systems. Look at these electromagnetic frequencies. They're designed to interface with the neural activity of Earth-based life forms. Marcus looked alarmed. You mean they want to control other living things? Not control, Jessica corrected, her scientific understanding crystallizing. Symbiosis. They're preparing to form biological partnerships with Earth species, possibly including humans. Dr. Chen's expression grew grave, which explains why Meridian Solutions is so desperate to gain control of our research. If these organisms can form symbiotic relationships with human biology, whoever controls the process controls the future evolution of our species. Dr. Rivera, General Harrison's voice carried new urgency. Our satellite data shows the global energy buildup will reach critical mass within 48 hours. We need your assessment. Are we looking at an invasion or an invitation? Jessica studied the biological data with everything she'd learned from 15 years of veterinary practice. The patterns were complex but unmistakably purposeful. These organisms weren't acting like invaders, but like species seeking to establish mutually beneficial relationships. General, based on the biological indicators, I believe we're looking at an integration event. These organisms appear designed to enhance rather than replace Earth's biological systems. The question is whether we can manage the process safely and if Meridian gains control of the integration process, Dr. Chen asked. Jessica understood the implications immediately. They'd weaponize it. Instead of natural symbiosis, they'd force the process to create enhanced soldiers, controlled populations, or biological weapons. The same technology that could represent the next step in human evolution would become a tool for corporate domination. Marcus had been listening intently to the adult conversation. So the alien plants aren't the real problem. It's the bad people who want to misuse them. Exactly right, Jessica confirmed, proud of her son's understanding. Which is why our work here matters so much. We're not just protecting research data, we're protecting humanity's future, Dr. Chen nodded grimly. And we have less than 48 hours to ensure that future is decided by scientists and ethicists, not by corporate interests and military contractors. The weight of responsibility settled over Jessica like a physical force. Her desperate purchase of a foreclosed barn had placed her family at the center of the most significant event in human history. Just as Jessica was beginning to understand the global implications of their discovery, the alien specimens in the research chamber began exhibiting entirely new behavior. The metallic plants started producing a harmonic frequency that resonated through the facility's structure, and their electromagnetic emissions suddenly shifted to match human brainwave patterns. Dr. Rivera, Dr. Chen called urgently from the monitoring station. The organisms are responding to your presence specifically. Your bioelectric field is triggering direct communication attempts. On the displays, Jessica could see energy patterns that perfectly mirrored her own neural activity. The alien specimens weren't just awakening, they were trying to establish contact with her personally. Marcus pressed closer to his mother as the harmonic frequency intensified. "Mum, I think they recognize you somehow." It's not recognition, Jessica realized, her veterinary training helping her interpret the biological data. It's selection. These organisms are designed to identify and bond with individuals who possess specific genetic markers related to interspecies disease resistance. Her specialization in zoonotic diseases wasn't just professionally relevant, it was biologically necessary. The alien organisms required human partners with natural immunity to cross-species pathogens. Suddenly, alarms began blaring again, but these weren't security alerts. The facility's radiation detectors were registering massive energy spikes as the specimens began a rapid transformation process. All personnel to emergency stations. General Harrison's voice echoed through the facility. We're detecting similar energy spikes at all global locations. The integration event has begun ahead of schedule. Through the security feeds, Jessica could see that Meridian's forces hadn't retreated as far as expected. Instead, they'd established a perimeter and were deploying what appeared to be electromagnetic interference equipment, trying to disrupt the facility's communications and monitoring systems. They're jamming our connection to the other sites, Dr. Chen announced. Meridian is trying to isolate us during the critical phase. The alien specimens were now glowing with visible energy, and the air in the research chamber crackled with static electricity. But instead of feeling threatening, Jessica found herself experiencing a strange sense of connection to the organisms. Dr. Rivera, came a new voice through the facility's communication system, but this wasn't from any human source. The voice seemed to come from the specimens themselves, transmitted through the facility's electromagnetic systems. We have waited long for one with the genetic markers necessary for safe integration. Will you serve as first contact liaison between our species and yours? Marcus stared at his mother in amazement. Mom, the alien plants are talking to you, Jessica realized. That everything had led to this moment. Her veterinary expertise, the desperate purchase of the barn, Marcus's presence, even Meridian's interference, all had been necessary components of a contact event that had been planned for decades. What happens if I say yes? She asked the alien consciousness. Integration proceeds naturally, with safeguards for both species. Human evolution advances gradually, with full consent and understanding. Your offspring becomes part of a new, symbiotic relationship that benefits both civilizations. And if I refuse? Integration becomes chaotic, uncontrolled. Other humans without proper genetic markers attempt contact, resulting in biological incompatibility. Planetary symbiosis fails, and both species suffer consequences. Dr. Chen was monitoring global data feeds on her remaining equipment. Jessica, we're losing contact with other facilities. If Meridian successfully disrupts the integration process at multiple sites, the organisms might trigger emergency protocols we can't predict. Marcus took his mother's hand. Mom, you always taught me that helping sick animals was worth taking risks. Maybe helping these alien plants is the same thing, just bigger. Jessica looked at her son, whose 12-year-old wisdom had guided them. Correctly at every crucial decision point, the choice wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the future Marcus would inherit. I accept, she announced to the alien consciousness. But Marcus stays with me through the entire process. Agreed. Integration begins now. As energy from the alien specimens began flowing toward Jessica, she realized that their journey from homeless desperation to interstellar diplomacy was just beginning. The symbiotic integration process proved gentler than Jessica had feared. Instead of physical transformation, she experienced an expansion of awareness that allowed her to understand biological systems at a molecular level. Her veterinary knowledge became enhanced with insights into interstellar biology, making her Earth's first truly qualified xenobiologist. Marcus, protected by his genetic similarity to his mother, became humanity's youngest interspecies communication specialist, able to interpret the aliens' harmonic language with intuitive ease. Within hours, the integration events at all 12 global sites proceeded smoothly under Jessica's remote guidance. Meridian's interference attempts failed as their electronic equipment proved incompatible with the new biological electromagnetic hybrid technology that emerged from successful human-alien cooperation. Dr. Rivera, General Harrison announced. Through the now enhanced communication systems, preliminary reports from all sites indicate successful integration with zero casualties. The symbiotic organisms are already demonstrating applications for clean energy, medical advancement, and space exploration technology. The federal protection protocols remained in place, but now Jessica and Marcus were essential personnel rather than refugees needing rescue. 6 months later, their barn had become the primary research center for human-alien cooperation, with Jessica serving as Director of Interspecies Biology and Marcus attending specialized education programs that prepared him for a future where interstellar communication was routine. The financial struggles that had driven them to buy the foreclosed property seemed like ancient history. Jessica's federal consultant's salary, combined with patents on hybrid technologies developed through the symbiotic research, had secured their financial future beyond anything she dreamed possible. More importantly, their relationship had strengthened through shared purpose. Marcus's early confidence in his mother's decisions had proven prophetic, and Jessica's willingness to include him as a partner in their adventures had created an unshakable family bond. "Mom," Marcus said one evening as they watched the alien specimens, now thriving in expanded research gardens, pulse with gentle bioluminescence. "Do you ever miss when our biggest problem was just finding a place to live?" Jessica smiled, her enhanced awareness allowing her to perceive the harmony between human and alien life forms working together across the property. "I miss the simplicity sometimes, but I wouldn't trade what we've built here." The barn that had started as a desperate last resort had become humanity's gateway to the stars. Under Jessica's scientific leadership, the hybrid technologies were being shared globally through international cooperation protocols, ensuring that the benefits of interspecies symbiosis reached all of humanity rather than being monopolized by corporate interests. Marcus, now 13 and fluent in harmonic alien communication, was already planning university studies in xenobiology and interstellar diplomacy, fields that hadn't existed when Jessica bought their foreclosed barn. Their story had become proof that sometimes the most desperate decisions lead to the most extraordinary opportunities. And that expertise combined with courage could literally change the world. As helicopters continued to arrive weekly, with international scientists eager to study at their facility, Jessica reflected that their journey from eviction notice to interstellar diplomacy proved that home wasn't just a place to live, it was a place to build the future. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.